What is going on, everyone? So as you guys know, the iPhone XS was released probably like not even a week ago, but it actually came out 2 days ago on Friday, and I actually had to go to the Apple Store and pick it up because I totally forgot to pre-order it and I'm such an idiot. But the predecessor of the iPhone XS was the iPhone X technically, but also the iPhone 8 and also the iPhone 8 Plus. But right now we're going to compare the iPhone 8 to the iPhone XS and just kind of see which one you should get. And I'm just going to say this spoiler alert, if you have unlimited amount of money, I say this in every video, if your father or mother or your grandmother or your great-great-great-grandmother is going to buy you your phone, then just have them just buy you the iPhone XS. It's the best iPhone right now. It's going to last you forever. It's like there's no reason not to. Obviously, the iPhone XS is a better phone. This is not about seeing which phone is better. This video is more so just to see should you upgrade if you have it, or should you save some money and get an iPhone 8, or spend the more money and get the iPhone XS. And now just going through it, in terms of the bodies, the iPhone 8 is just a little bit smaller than the iPhone XS. It's not a little bit. If you held the iPhone 8 in one hand and the iPhone XS in the other, you can easily tell that they're different sizes. But it's not completely small. Like the iPhone 8 is not small at all. But because the iPhone XS has basically the whole screen, has basically the whole front of just screen, and the iPhone 8 does not, that does kind of make it feel like it's much bigger than it is, but it really isn't. And I find the iPhone XS size to be very, very good. It's a very good sweet spot. The iPhone 8 has a 4.7-inch IPS panel, which clocked at 750 by 1334, and the PPI is around 326 pixels per inch, where the iPhone XS has a 5.8-inch Super AMOLED screen, which is clocked at 1125 by 2436, and that PPI is around 458. So the screen on the iPhone XS is one of the greatest aspects of this phone. It is so nice. It is such a nice panel. The iPhone 8 panel, I mean, it's pretty much the same screen from the iPhone 6. I know it got brighter and all this stuff and True Tone and all that, but I just don't think the iPhone 8's panel is, comparable nowadays to what we have. The iPhone XS screen is super good. It's still not the best panel out there. I feel like the Note 9 does have the advantage here, but I do think the iPhone XS screen is very, very good and one of the better aspects of the phone. Now also we had an upgrade within the waterproofness of the phone. Now this phone isn't technically waterproof, it's just water and dust resistant. And on the iPhone 8 we had IP67 dust and water resistance, so that means that you could dip your phone in 1 meter of water for 30 minutes and you'll be set. As long as you didn't really exceed that or put it over that time, you will probably be good. But on the iPhone XS they actually doubled the length of it. Basically they kept the same time, 30 minutes, but they doubled the length, so you can now go in 2 meters of water for 30 minutes, which is very, very cool. And I feel like eventually we're going to get to a point where all of our phones are going to be completely waterproof, and I kind of want that. I mean, I want to be able to dip my phone into an ocean and find it like 2 months later and it still be able to work. And I think eventually we're going to be like that, but as of right now, I do kind of like these baby steps that we're going in, and it kind of a peace of mind. Like if you throw water on your phone or something with the iPhone 8 or the iPhone XS, it's going to be perfectly fine on both, basically. Now this is kind of interesting. The iPhone 8 and 8 Plus were the last phones to have home buttons, and the iPhone XS is pretty much the future. The iPhone X was the future too. And the iPhone 8 started off getting iOS 11, which wasn't too good, and now it's getting iOS 12, 13, 14, and it's probably going to get iOS 15. But because it's the last phone to have a home button, I think Apple is just going to not support it for an extra year, like sometimes they do, just because they want to kind of hurry up and get rid of those phones that have home buttons so they can kind of go with the more gesture-based things. And I do think the iPhone XS is going to last a little bit longer. I mean, in terms of right now, the iPhone XS is going to last longer, but because it started off on iOS 12, I think it's going to get up to iOS 17, maybe. I think the iPhone X is going to get iOS 16 as well, just one more version above the iPhone 8, just because it did come out a little bit later and because it's more gesture-based and all those things, and that is the future. I don't think iPhones are going to develop too crazy from now and basically until like iOS 14 or iOS 15, so I guess we'll find out then, but it's pretty interesting. But no doubt the iPhone XS is going to last you longer in terms of software updates as well. Now in terms of the performance, okay, before I even say anything, the iPhone XS is faster. This is not going to be a speed test. The iPhone XS 100% is a faster phone, and rightfully so. It should be a faster phone because you're paying more money for a phone to be more fast than the previous generation. So the iPhone 8 had the Apple A11 Bionic chip. It had a hexa-core processor and 2 gigabytes of RAM, and the iPhone XS has the Apple A12 Bionic chip, a hexa-core processor as well, and 4 gigabytes of RAM. So it pretty much has twice the amount of RAM, and it's way faster than the iPhone 8. And you can do a lot with the iPhone XS in terms of performance, and whether you're opening apps, closing apps, multitasking between extremely heavy games and all these different things, it's going to work perfectly fine. You're not going to have any problems, but at the same time, the iPhone 8 isn't that slow either. It does have 2 gigabytes of RAM, which was the same as the iPhone 6s that came in 2015. I really wish they added at least 3 gigabytes of RAM in it, but even at that point, I mean, it's still not a horrible thing they did. And I don't think the iPhone 8 is extremely slow either. And if you have an iPhone 8 now, whether you're gaming or anything like that, you'll see that it's perfectly fine. Like, it's not that big of a deal, actually. One thing, though, that I found with the iPhone XS, and it's kind of a compliment, like, I don't get this, but like when you play a heavier intensive game sometimes, and I said this in like 30 other videos, sometimes heavier intensive games do run benchmarks in the background to see if you have like an iPhone 6 or an iPhone XS, to see if they should higher the graphics or lower the graphics. And they pretty much up the graphics every single time to every single game to the highest potential. And sometimes there are some glitched frames. And I feel like if we lowered it to about the medium frame rate or the medium graphics, it might have been faster. But it's really not that bad. And sometimes games do end up being a little bit too fast. But dude, even then, it's like, it's not the worst thing ever. It's like not bad at all. But that's actually kind of a compliment. I think new software versions and new updates to the games and everything will fix those things. But I mean, that's really the only issue I have. And that issue is because the phone is too fast and not too slow. But really, if the iPhone XS was 100% on the powerful scale of performance, the iPhone 8 is probably around like a 75%, 80%. Really, it only lags down because of the RAM. But I mean, other than that, it's not that bad, I would say. And kind of moving on to the camera, the iPhone XS's camera is much better than the iPhone 8. And the iPhone 8's camera isn't horrible, but we do have 2 sensors on the back of the iPhone XS. We only have one on the iPhone 8, and that kind of limits your features. You can't do portrait mode, portrait lighting. The iPhone XS has smart HDR, and it also has the new bokeh effect, which you can emulate with third-party apps. But the iPhone XS, I mean, the photos it takes, the videos it takes are super awesome. An interesting thing is, and I didn't know this, the iPhone 8 and the iPhone XS can shoot the same video resolution, so it can shoot 4K at 60 frames per second and 1080p videos at up to 240 frames per second. So that's kind of weird. Apple didn't really up that at all. I really wish they did. But even at that, I mean, the iPhone 8's camera isn't horrible. I mean, you can still use it, but the iPhone XS camera is better just because it allows you to utilize all those new features of the secondary camera, such as the zoom in effect and all those things where you can zoom in like 30,000 times more and all that. But the iPhone XS camera is definitely better. The front camera is also different. So it's the same 7 megapixel front camera, but you can now shoot 1080p at 60 frames per second. And I think that's the stock rating. I don't think you can change it back to 30 frames because I tried to do it. I could not find it. So that's a good thing, but still I'd rather do 60 frames than 30 frames per second on the front camera. So that's super cool, and I'm glad they did that. Now moving on to battery life, I mean, the iPhone XS is going to have better battery life, which is weird because the iPhone XS is actually a decrease in the amount of battery size from the iPhone X. And even then, the iPhone XS has better battery life than the iPhone 8. And the iPhone 8 didn't have horrible battery life, but because they just keep like decreasing the sizes and making the phone more powerful, it's just going to make the phone not as sufficient in the battery life. So it's going to be like so weird sometimes. But the iPhone 8 definitely isn't horrible in the battery life. You probably can get through a day, but the iPhone XS is definitely much better. Now, some other notable things to note, both these phones have wireless charging. The iPhone XS obviously does not have a home button where the iPhone 8 does, and Face ID apparently did get an improvement, but I didn't really feel it at all. I mean, it might have, but I don't really feel it, I'll be honest. The glass is now a little bit stronger on the iPhone XS, so if you drop your phone, technically speaking, the iPhone XS will be able to handle it better and not possibly crack, whereas on the iPhone 8 it might happen. The iPhone XS does have a new antenna band on the bottom as well, which kind of cuts into the speaker a little bit, but for me it's not that big of a deal. I know it bothered some people, but it didn't really bother me at all. And like I said, the iPhone XS now has the IP68 dust and water resistance, where the iPhone 8 only had IP67. And pretty much going from there, I mean, here's a couple scenarios where I'll break it down, okay? If you have an iPhone 8 and you want to know whether you should update to an iPhone XS, I'll be like, no, just keep your iPhone 8 for a little bit longer. Just wait out for like a couple months, even like up until January or December, and the used prices for these things are going to start coming out. And you could probably pick up an iPhone XS for like $800, which is still like a couple $100 cheaper. And I would probably recommend you guys to do that if you already have an iPhone 8. But if you don't have an iPhone 8, you have an even older phone, and you're trying to decide whether you should save your money or get the iPhone 7, I will say you could even get an iPhone 10. The iPhone 10 from like an iPhone 5 or 6 or this or whatever 7 is still a humongous upgrade, and it's probably just as big as going from like an iPhone 6 to an iPhone 10. Is a much bigger leap than going from like an iPhone 10 to an iPhone XS, obviously, because there's so many years in between. But even going from an iPhone 8 to an iPhone 10 is a much bigger leap than an iPhone 10 to an iPhone XS, even though they're not even like one generation away. So I would definitely recommend you guys to do that. It just makes no sense to get the iPhone XS. It's just so expensive for the same thing almost, you know. And that is it. That is my opinion. If you guys want to pick up an iPhone 10 or an iPhone 8, I'll leave a link in the description if you guys want to get it. Definitely get it through that link so you can help support the channel. If you guys have any questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, but definitely hit that subscribe button, guys. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My second channel, my Twitter, my Instagram, all that stuff is down there. I would really, really appreciate if you guys could go and check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.